chatting here because it looks like we are live.
Ta-da. Hi there, Joel.
Hey, good to see you, Anna.
Good to see you.
So, yeah, well, let me put up a little title here so we can make it official. Uh, there it is. We're gonna have our first, um, you know, chat of the Lazy-Faire readers, I guess. I don't know what else to call us, but that's what we're calling them now. So let me actually quick share this little story. So it's Reformation Day. You see, everyone, we're all wearing red, and that's a thing. Yeah, I don't know what to call it other than a thing. So the congregation that sent me to seminary, Mercy Seat Lutheran Church, there was a group at that congregation called the World's Laziest Book Club, and I couldn't name this book club the World's Laziest Book Club because that already
That's
existed.
already been taken.
Exactly right. Yeah. So, but I wanted a way to start thinking about how to get back together, kind of in this like receding pandemic, and to kind of get back into this idea of, yeah, it's good that we should get together. And so this laissez-faire is, of course, this idea of let people do as they choose, as they wish. And so this is the Lazy-Faire readers. And so this group, well, it's or I guess fitting that the 22 books I ordered from Augsburg Fortress, 22 copies of Anna Madsen's book, didn't show up in time for Reformation Day. They're showing up tomorrow. And so it's the right start for the Lazy-Faire readers to
The last
have
of
the
you.
book show up late. Go
It's
ahead.
scripture driven, right?
Yeah. But we wanted to, because the book is coming, and some folks have already actually picked up a copy. We thought we wanted to start on Reformation Day and talk a little bit about Anna, about your book, and just put it online for people to see. And I even should see if I'll try and open up some comments here um, while we're looking at it. See, I have way too many screens in front of me, and that's just dangerous. So,
Yeah.
uh,
I think I'm
yeah,
looking
right,
to myself.
right,
No
yeah.
judgment. No solidarity.
So we were talking before we got online, Anna, about this being Reformation Day and some of the kind of liturgy pieces of the Reformation, and we were kind of, you see, here's the thing, right? People are starting to maybe learn this about me, that when we get into these topics, I could talk forever. So you and I said, well, let's just do this for 30 minutes. And I think we been on now for over an hour
Yep.
or getting close.
About that. Yep. Really close.
Right. Okay. Um, so yeah, maybe you could tell me a little bit more about where you're kind of leaning these days, and then I want to share a song that came kind of about over the conversations with you over these last couple months, and another way for people to connect to this extremely lazy reading of your book, which is going to also involve some really important questions. So,
Yeah.
yeah, how are you?
Right.
And what were we chatting about with the liturgy that I thought was really interesting?
Well, here's what we weren't chatting about, but because my brain is a lot like your brain, it's taking me in a new direction. One of the pieces that I think was so crucial for Luther's Reformation, of course, we as Lutherans, rightly
Yeah.
so, gravitate toward this justification, and we're going to spend a mess of time over the course of these several weeks talking about justification. But one of the other pieces is his notion of the priesthood of all believers, which actually is a phrase, a fun fact that he didn't use, but he certainly extolled the notion of the laity being priests by virtue of their baptism. And if you think about it in the context of his day, where the only church essentially was the Catholic Church, which is why, of course, we have no problem talking about the one holy Catholic Church, because it means universal, and it was in point effect at that time, the one kind of game in town.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a very hierarchical, established church, and arguably still is. And so the notion of suggesting that the carpenter down the street or the homemaker up the way were also priests was, I mean, just mind blowing, right? But this is relevant for, I think, all sorts of reasons, not least of all, this notion of the word liturgy, because the word liturgy means, you see where I'm going here?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, oh yeah.
The word nerd, highest of compliment in my world. But the word liturgy is the fusion of two Greek words, laos and
Mm-hmm.
ergos. Laos means people, and ergos means work. So it literally means the work of the people, right? So then, when you kind of dig a little bit deeper, you begin to wonder, well, heck, when did we first start using the word liturgy? And it isn't used in Scripture, but it was used at the times, Jesus's day. And interestingly, this could blow all sorts of minds too. Interestingly, the word liturgy meant two things. One, commerce, when people came together to work
Mm-hmm.
in the business district,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
To share in shopping and sales and trades and what have you. But it also meant essentially taxes that the wealthy, and here's the interesting piece, gladly paid for the well-being of the community. So it was, they were proud, and in fact wanted to lift themselves up, lift up their reputation by giving all the more to make the
Yeah.
entire community better. So the liturgy was basically the taxes that the wealthy paid for the betterment of everybody, right? So that's a whole nother direction that we could
Yeah.
have some fun going on. But I'm gonna pull and rein myself in here. But
Yeah.
but of course, we in the church have adapted and adopted the term, the liturgy, as the work of the people, not the work of the pastors, right, or the rostered leaders, but the work of all of the people. In fact, I just wrote a blog today, in which I mentioned that for those of us who come from the Lutheran tradition, we will have rostered leaders presiding and preaching. But then typically there is an assisting minister, and that assisting minister technically is not supposed to be ordained, but rather is supposed to be lay. And the terminology is both problematic but promising. And the term assisting minister, I think, unfortunately, has been assumed to mean that the layperson assists the rostered leader, assists the pastor, assists the presider or the preacher.
Right.
But that's messed up and not right. And instead, the original notion was that the assisting minister assisted the congregation as a lay member, was a representative of the laity, right? To help them in the liturgy.
Right.
So on this Reformation Day, I think that's really important to think about how we have assisting ministers who are lay to assist us in the work of the people, which is the liturgy.
So
So
okay.
does that
Yeah.
make sense? And I know we
It,
haven't gotten to the whole point of which we intended to get to, but I think that's kind of a fun little nerdy groundwork.
all
Yeah.
right. Okay. So there's two nerdy things that one that I was thinking about when I was leading parts of the liturgy this morning because we had confirmation. I had 8 confirmands come through East Side and had that service happen today. And so, but I think we'll see if we have time for that conversation. I want to go back to your kind of parsing of the word liturgy
Yeah.
to go into a early part of your book. So for those of you who are part of the 22 books that I picked up that are coming, arriving tomorrow, and you'll be
Soon and
getting
very
them this
soon.
next week, yeah. But for other people, I know some people have already picked up your book, and are starting to read. And so we wanted to have a little time where we could frame some thoughts or some questions around the first kind of the preface and the first chapter and the beginning of the second. And I really loved in your first chapter this memory that you had of you were teaching some students, and the word was agape, and everyone kept on mispronouncing it as agape.
Almost
And
right. It was a final, so they had to define terms, and
oh,
not
right,
one but two of my college students, when it came to agape, um, wrote mouth wide open.
right,
Yeah,
which is like the visual part of me just kind of goes, oh, isn't that interesting? Agape love, mouth wide open, right?
yeah,
Of
right. I
course,
mean, it's yeah.
getting it right and completely wrong all at the same time, which is lovely.
Which is such a Lutheran thing, right? Both
Yeah,
and.
yeah, yeah, and so then so there's that story in the first chapter that I think is really an interesting part for us to have discussion on when we get into some groups, or just even with your friends, to like, yeah, how many times have we gotten lost in translation, or
Yeah,
how many times have we kind of missed the forest for the trees, or put the wrong, the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable, and
yeah,
and then it just leads to kind of chaos, which is an interesting part of your book that I think we're going to get to maybe as our closing question. But before we do that, I want to share this tune that I wrote because of those stories, because of our conversations over the last couple months. Um, I wanted to kind of incorporate my time as a musician and the kind of community around Tango Blue, which is the band that Amy and I have done for the last 20 years, into this reading. And so I want to just share it with you now. I should just stop talking about it and just share it.
go for it. It's
So
beautiful.
go ahead, say it again.
It's beautiful.
Oh, well, thank you. I sent, for those of you, I sent it to Anna this morning, completed it last night. It's just guitar and my voice and Amy's voice. And Amy hasn't heard it yet.
Oh, she hasn't. Oh,
No. So everyone else, you're going to get to hear it before Amy does. Because she had five, where's my fingers?
there it is.
Five worship services today, with all of the confirmation students being confirmed out in her congregation at Brandon Lutheran and Split Rock Lutheran. So she's actually on her way home, but we're going to go ahead and I want to share this song with you now, brought about and sharing the same title as Anna's book, I Can Do No Other. Here it is. Maybe here it is. Let's see if I can get it to go. Oh no! I can see it on my screen here, but it's not going live. So let me see
I
what's
wonder.
happening. You can still see me, right, Anna?
Absolutely.
Okay, all right. Well then, let me see if I can.
If all else fails, it can be thrown in the comments, I bet.
Right. Well, that is true. So I'll try one more thing here, and we'll see if I can share it. And then
Well,
if
and if
that
all
doesn't
else
work,
fails too, we have two options. Either just maybe stick it in the comments, because it's so lovely.
oh,
But another thing is, while you're fussing with that, trying to
yeah,
wrestle to the ground,
go ahead.
I could mention another piece that you had thought maybe would be worth talking about, which is
Hmm.
this totally appropriate for Martin Luther, or for Reformation Day, to think about his word, his definition of God,
Oh,
which
right.
ties into this liturgy conversation that we had earlier. Would that be all right?
Go
And
for
that
it. Go for
I
it.
do a little time to wrestle
Yeah.
that one out. Because you had wondered what I found to be perhaps the kind of the most important thrust of that first chapter in the book. And I think the most important part, not only of the first chapter of that book, but really, I think, of the question that we're facing in the church today is a first commandment issue. Who or what is our God? What is the thing that is most important to us? And this is what's curious, because Luther, of course, fussed with that in his Large and Small Catechism, and then he did an explanation. And you would presume from a theologian of the church that when he defined God, he would have just gone straight away to sort of words of piety, of fidelity, of faith, using Christian language, but he didn't so very much. And instead, he said that your God is that in whom or in which you place your ultimate trust, which I find to be so fascinating, right? And so he didn't say, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, or, is the joke is with children's sermons, what's small, fuzzy, has a long tail and likes to eat nuts, Jesus. He didn't do that. And instead, really took a very meta, so to speak, definition, that your God is that in which or in whom you place your ultimate trust. And that word ultimate, I think, is so important because it's a word that means the last thing, the only thing, the final thing, as opposed to penultimate, which is a word that we don't use very often in the Christian tradition. But I think it would be a really helpful piece, a really helpful term for us to use more regularly, because it forces us or invites us to think about the things that we might think are God, but aren't. Because I think it's easy to talk about how there are alternatives that are, kind of low hanging fruit options. Like we can make money a God, or we can make, addictions a God, or we can make work a God, or status a God, all of which are true. And we're going to delve
Mm-hmm.
into that. But I think
Yep.
it's also true that we can make things that are quite noble and righteous gods.
Right.
So, as I talk about in the book, in 2004, an accident killed my husband and gave my son a TBI. And I had, without even recognizing it, made their immortality, in a sense, a God. I had simply trusted that they would always be there and always be fine. And in a shocking moment, discovered that that trust was misplaced. And so if I had put my entire identity on that assumption, there would have been nothing left of me. And in point of fact, that came very close to being true. So what Luther's trying to get us to consider is a throwback, in a sense, to God's understanding of the first commandment, which wasn't "there are no other gods," but rather "you shall have no other gods before me." In other words, even God recognized we have choices, we've got
Mm-hmm.
options. And so the piece of that first chapter is to reiterate that that the word God has to mean something, right? It has to have
Mm-hmm.
substance, it has to have heft. Because if it's just kind of a whatever word, then we have a whatever faith. It becomes
Yep.
irrelevant and really meaningless. And so to define, not least of all, what our God is, sort of sets the stage for everything else. And how we go about that is what we'll get into the next piece. But I think even today in our worship services, for those of us who celebrated Reformation Sunday, often many of us also had concurrently confirmation celebrations. And we certainly did at our home congregation. And a huge shout out. I've got just a tremendous rocking congregation, Gloria Dei Lutheran in Duluth. And we had the same liturgy that you folks did, as I
Right.
understand. But there's
Mm-hmm.
this piece in there, the profession of faith. So my little pet peeve is when we talk about people getting confirmed, because that's passive, right? That's
Right.
something that happens to them. as opposed to people making their confirmation, or even better, as we have it here in the ELW, affirming our baptism. Because Lutheran theology says that we, not just Lutheran theology, but many denominational
Right.
theologies say that infants are baptized, and that is just a tremendous testament and witness to the fact that it's all about grace. Like God has accepted. You can't accept Jesus because God's already accepted you. Like that's been taken care of. But confirmation is really this beautiful moment when young people or adults can in a sense stand by that and hence affirm their baptism. Say, "Yep, I'm in." Right? I recognize that God loves me no matter what, but now I'm willing to participate in that promise, which is why we have that section, the profession of faith.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, interestingly, we not only profess our faith, but we also offer renunciations because we understand that if we say this, that also means that we are not about that. And so we have these powerful phrases that I think too often just tumble off our tongues, when in point of fact, they identify who we are and what we do. And so, do you renounce the devil and all the forces that defy God? Wow, like seatbelts, everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Do we understand what we're just saying here? Because you can't tepidly renounce anything, right? Yeah, that there's a conviction behind it, but you also can't renounce something if you don't know what you're renouncing or in contrast to what. And so again, do you renounce the devil and all the forces that defy God? Well, it's easier to do if you understood who God is. What do you mean by God, right? In whom or in what do you place your ultimate trust? Or do you renounce the powers of this world that rebel against God? Well, yeah, except, it would be handy dandy to figure out what do I mean when I say that, because otherwise
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't know what I'm renouncing. Or do you renounce the ways of sin that draw you from God? Um, and so, unless we spend some time, not just individually, but I think collectively, to identify in whom do we trust, in what do we trust,
Yeah.
then we have a very difficult time not only renouncing the contra powers, right, and figuring out collectively how do we do that, or that very Lutheran question, what does this mean? But
Mm-hmm.
it also enables us to figure out, okay, but then how does that enliven our life, shape our life? How does that define us? Because your God does define who you are and what you do and how you live. And so I think the liturgy, to circle back, of the affirmation of baptism echoes really a large part of what I'm hoping to do in that first chapter, namely, who or what is your God? Are you throwing in, are you throwing in your weight to that God or a different one? Because we know even God knows you got options, which is really, I think, a
Mm-hmm.
Reformation Day sort of conversation and question.
So, so many rabbit trails, right? Okay. Uh, so, let me say this. I think I figured out how to share the song.
Yeah,
Um,
good.
and I think I do feel like there'll probably be a playlist associated with this reading of your book, because the song that came to mind as you were kind of talking about, you know, this Reformation kind of question, Martin Luther question of who's your God,
Right.
is the song lyric is from John Cougar Mellencamp, and I believe he grew up in a Lutheran tradition back in Indiana, and the song lyric is, the chorus is, "You got to stand for something, or you'll fall for anything."
Yeah. That's
Uh,
also in Hamilton,
right.
too.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. So
Exactly. Yep.
let me see if I can do this now. Well, let's see. I have to somehow turn off this.
If you cut me off, it's probably a smart thing, a good thing.
Oh, I don't know about that. Let's just see if I can for some reason, I've got right now, I think on everyone's screen, it's probably black.
Yep.
We'll see. Yeah, it is. That's so bad. Well, if you're still watching, now you're just seeing the epic failure of.
But you're justified.
Well, so that's really, really interesting. I have no idea um, how it is that I got to the place where the live screen is black and and it's not showing anything. Well, I'm just gonna see what we can do to alleviate that. Um, oh, there we go.
There you are.
Oh, lovely. Okay. Well, I don't know how many people, you know, according to this, it looks like there's still 6 people watching us on Facebook Live. So thanks, everybody. Uh, let's see if we can get to this song now that I've punched buttons long enough to see if it'll work. All right, here we go.
That's a good one.
No, still not
Not
working.
gonna happen.
Well, now that we've talked it all up, it's
It
it looks like,
deserves, frankly, a post of its own.
well, that's very generous of you. Um, and yeah, I just have no idea how I changed that. Look at that. Okay. Now it's saying
Now, oh,
that's live. Well, this is just
it's
super
it's
odd.
it's
There we
par
go.
for the pandemic. There.
All right. Well, ha.
Here I stand.
No, you know, if I ever get this right, let's just
It
see if I can one more time, Anna.
no worries. It's just par for the pandemic techie course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Here we go.
Ha.
Here I stand, not where I'd planned, but where you are, there I am. Come what may, Spirit, have your way, bound and free. I can do no other. Alleluias form a lump in my throat, failed pronouncements, agape with sorrow swallows body and soul. Stir this darkness, create in me eyes to see. Here I stand, not where I planned, but where you are, there can do no other. Death cannot claim me, it cannot claim you. Light illumine. The path before us is both old and new. Hope and motion, trimmed to the light. Justice in sight. Here we stand, hand in hand, and where Christ is, may we land. Trace the mark, cross our hearts, show the way, one to another, bound and free. We can do no other.
All
So
right.
beautiful.
Wow.
Voices
Thanks.
together. Magic.
Well, thanks. I'm glad I finally got it out there because I'm really glad that I get to share it with people. Um, what I think, in writing out that tune, in kind of figuring out um, really all that we've been chatting about for the last couple of months now, Anna. The the thing that there's a couple different turns of phrase that are right out of your book, so it's almost like I need to give you a co-composer right piece to this song, um, because the whole Agape piece that was in chapter one, and in the beginning of chapter two, you have this whole story about being trimmed to the white light, and it's a story that folks, you're just going to have to read the book. It's being in chapter two, being trimmed to the white light, but it does kind of run into this whole idea of how do we define God, being trimmed to the white light. And it's a really interesting thing because the metaphor, right? You could think about it as, eyes on heaven or those kinds of things. But that's not actually what's happening in the story in your book, which I don't want to give away here because I want people to go buy your book. I want people to read it. But being trimmed to the white light in this metaphor is about balance, and this whole idea that the Reformation, which is today, what we celebrate today, is um, was about a rebalancing 500 years ago, and the conversation that we're having today is like, what does balance look like today?
Right.
And so I want to close off our time here and kind of lead into kind of other conversations. For those of you who want to be a part of this reading, you can jump over to the church's page, eastsidellc.org/lazy, because that's where you'll find all the information on this. And so if you want to either join in reading online or join in a small group around Sioux Falls, if you happen to be around Sioux Falls, you don't have to be a part of the church. You can just come and join us, and we'll post all the information there at that eastsidellc.org/lazy. Um, but I want to leave with this idea that the question we're asking about is what's happening for a Reformation now. And in the song, Trimmed to the White Light, in the second verse, the rhyming scheme, trimmed to the light, justice in sight.
Yeah.
And in the liturgy today, I was just moved that I got to speak these words to our new confirmands. And here's the words that I got to speak in the liturgy. You have made public profession of your faith. Do you intend to continue in the covenant God made with you in holy baptism, to live among God's faithful people, to hear the word of God and to share in the Lord's Supper, to proclaim the good news of God in Christ through word and deed, to serve all people, following the example of Jesus, and to strive for justice and peace in all the earth.
Yeah.
And that's a proclamation worth saying
That
again and again.
that's right. Exactly. That's an every Sunday kicker. And I think to kind of lean into our next conversations, I think it inherently is an every Sunday kicker because I think that that's what the gospel broadly frees us to do. And I think one of the challenges within the Lutheran tradition, but maybe not exclusively there, is to broaden our understanding of what the good news is. And so while it includes the forgiveness of sins, and we are justified, it also includes doing justice and sharing peace. And that I think is where a new Reformation is.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we've been going now for a little while, and I want to have people want to come back for more.
Yeah.
So uh, again, if you are interested in more of these conversations, and or you just happen across this video, you can find out more. Sign up to get an email so you'll know in advance, rather than just kind of happening across this video on the internet. But eastsidellc.org/lazy for the later Lazy Readers reading of I Can Do No Other, book by Anna Madsen. And we'll be chatting about it in the month of November, both in person in Sioux Falls at Eastside Lutheran Church and online if you choose to join that way. Hey, thanks everybody
Thank you.
for being a part of this today, and looking forward to the next time we get to chat. Thanks, Anna.
Yep. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, happy Reformation Day.
Peace.
Peace. Bye.